we doing? I'm doing great because today we're doing a really fun video because we're talking about my favorite books of 2025. So this is just a selection of 10 books. I managed to narrow it down to a top 10 of my favorite books that I read in 2025. I have to say these are in no particular order because that's impossible. You want me to rank these? No. So these are just in the order that I read them in because that's just easier. But I actually read 25 5-stars in this past year, which is great, especially considering last year I had such bad luck with 5 stars and I barely read any. This year, to have this many was very kind, but I narrowed, like I said, I narrowed it down to a top 10 and I'm very excited to talk to you about them. So let's just get into it. Started off with Flirting with Disaster by Naina Kumar. This is actually the first 5-star of 2025. This is a adult romance book inspired by Sweet Home Alabama, the movie with Reese Witherspoon, and it follows a main character who is a lawyer who's also like going into politics, and she is currently engaged to this guy also in politics, but problem is she's still married, you know, like in the movie. She's still married to the guy she fell in love with in college, and they had like a very whirlwind romance, got married very soon, and they eventually broke up because she had bigger aspirations than the relationship allowed, let's say. And there was also some other issues between them, but that's like the big thing where they broke off. And they never really got divorced. So now that she is engaged again, she decides to go back to her hometown and give this guy the divorce papers, make sure it's taken care of. But as soon as she arrives in her town, a big storm comes. A big storm races through the town and she is locked into the house with her ex. That's technically not her ex because they're still married. And it's a moment between them. And I really loved it. As you know, I love a second chance romance, and this is definitely one done exactly right. I feel like this book does a great job showing us the relationship between them from before, and also giving a new point of connection now. It really goes into all of the struggles they had within their relationship before, make them talk about it, work it out. I really like that. And also because they do have this storm going on, they do have some moments where they kind of have to work together to kind of be able to survive. I guess that sounds dramatic, it's not that dramatic, but therefore they like have to put this trust in each other because otherwise it's not gonna work out. And I really like that element to it as well when it comes to like relationship building. On top of that, this also just was a really engaging read, and the fact that this is one of the first books I read this year and it's still so strongly in my mind says something, you know. Then next we have Heavenly Tyrant by Zhao. This is the sequel to Iron Widow, which I believe was also on my favorite list when that book, and I read that book for the first time. But this sequel was very highly anticipated. It was a very long wait and it was totally worth it. This series takes place in a sci-fi-ish world where there's these like fighter suits in the shape of like animals that have to be piloted by a man and a woman. And the guy basically siphons off the energy from the woman, and that's how the whole thing operates. And therefore the women oftentimes are concubines and they tend to die in battle a lot because all of the energy just gets sucked out of them, and that's it. But we follow Zechel in book 1, whose sister was a concubine to one of these pilots and also died, but not in these suits, but because this guy actually murdered her, and nothing ever got done about it. And of course Zechel was very pissed off about that, so she decides to also become a concubine for this guy and take her revenge, which she does by killing him in the fighter suit by siphoning all of his energy, which is completely unheard of before. So as a punishment, she gets set up with this other pilot who's like a dangerous criminal, and they're kind of put together so that the government can like keep tabs on them, you know, while also not revealing to the public just how dangerous and special they are. So that's the premise of the first book. A lot of shit happened in that one. This is the second one. These are YA, by the way. I don't know if I said that. This one does read a little bit older and ventures more into the new adult category, but technically is still YA. And I love this. This is a very different book from Iron Widow. Iron Widow is very quick, very action-packed. This is very politic. And it's not necessarily slow, but there's a lot of political intrigue in this one, and I love it. I think Zhao just has such a strong grip on her world and what she wants to say with these books, and the way it is executed is just so good. I just also think the world is really interesting, and we kind of expand on things in the second book, which of course I can't say too much about without spoiling things, and I think the way that is done is absolutely brilliant. So I already can't wait for the third book. Then next on the list we have Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I of course had to include an Ali Hazelwood on this list. I technically read 3 new Ali Hazelwoods this year. All of those were 5 stars. They're all also her new releases this year. But I decided to only put one on the list just to keep things fair a little. And then Deep End was easily my favorite. In this book we follow Scarlett, who is a diver in college, and a year before the start of the book she had an accident during one of the dives and like injured herself, and ever since then, even though she like that was an easy recovery, she has had like the yips around diving, so she can't perform this specific dive anymore properly, and that's like a big contention within her, you know, within her field, I guess. But where the romance for this book kicks in is with one of her team partners. She has been dating this guy named Lucas, who is a swimmer. They've been together forever and they're kind of like the golden couple of like the swim team. But at the start of the book, they wake up and this teammate of hers confides in Scarlett that the reason they broke up is because Lucas has very different like sexual preferences than she does, and that's a big reason as to why they broke up. And in trying to consolidate her friends, Scarlett kind of reveals that she has similar sexual preferences. And then on one drinking night, the teammate goes, "Hey, you two should fuck because you're born into the same things." And they're both like, "No, that's weird." But as Lucas and Scarlett's paths cross more often, they kind of do get intrigued by that idea. That's the premise of this book, and I loved it. I genuinely was really nervous for this because this is kind of like a very sex-forward book for Ali Hazelwood, and that's typically not something I like within my romance. But of course, I should have trust in Ali Hazelwood that she knows how to execute it, because obviously I love this book. So it was really well executed, and I really liked actually the relationship development. I also liked the discussions about consent in this book. I know a lot of people find that tedious, but that's the way things should be. On top of that, I also just think Scarlett's personal journey was really interesting, and you know, finding that confidence within herself again, within her dives again, I thought was also really well done and really just an intriguing read. And then I love the romances in general. I generally think this is like one of the sweetest romances I've read this year, even if it is that more sex-based front. Behind the scenes, there was just a lot of like them connecting with each other, talking about the issues they've been going through, and it gets so sweet because these two people just care so much about each other even before they realize they're in love with each other. And I don't know, I love it. And Lucas is like my second favorite Ali Hazelwood love interest, so I can't complain about that. Then next on the list we have The Hero of Ages by Brendan Sanderson. This is the third book in the Mistborn trilogy, at least the first era of Mistborn, and this was incredible. I should have known it would be. But last year, the second book in the series was on my favorites list, and this year the final one is because it was just so good. So this series takes place in this world where the magic basically works with like metals, and the people who can use the magic typically always have one kind of metal that they can use, and every metal has like a different ability, and I'm not going to go in depth in, but it's also very rare for people to be able to master all metals, but it is possible, and those people are called the Mistborn. And we follow Vin, who is a Mistborn, who has not realized it yet, and she is a bit of a criminal. She's a bit of a criminal, and she ends up catching the eye of Kelsier, who is also a Mistborn, probably the most famous Mistborn there is, because he's also kind of known as a bit of like a rebellious type figure, because this is also a world in which like the bad guy won, you know. And Kelsier ends up taking Vin under his wing and teaches her how to be a Mistborn, while also employing her in his gang of people that he's put together because he wants to overthrow the Dark Leader, you know. And that's the setup for the first book. But book 3, we're doing way different things, but it's so good. I don't know how Brendan Sanderson does this, but he just comes in with like the most basic reveal that puts a whole world on its head, and it's just like, huh? What do you mean? And it's always so masterfully done, because even though you never saw it coming, the moment it's like explained and it's like it's a thing, it's like, oh yeah, I can see how this has been a thing all along. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it is so interesting how he does that. And on top of that, I also just think this is a very interesting cast of characters that I really love following. I think this world is just so interesting, and the storyline, like I said, insane. The amount of twists and turns it takes. This book in particular focuses a lot on like faith in a way, where yes, it is religion based a lot, because some of the events of like the first books are already turning into like a religion of its own. And I think that's interesting to kind of see the forming of a religion. I think it's so interesting. But there's also like a character in this series that studies different kind of religions. And in his book in particular, he kind of struggles with like, is any of it real? Is any of it worth it? And I think that's really interesting. And on top of that, we go into like beliefs outside of religion as well, where characters just always had these strong beliefs, these strong morals, and because of events of the first two books, they're just like, but what if I can stick to those and still get done what I want to get done? And I think all of those discussions are very, very interesting and really well done in this book. And then also just the way this concludes is insane. Like, oh my god, I generally just had to take a moment after finishing this book to kind of recuperate, because I feel my brain was broken for a little while after this. Then, talking about books, I needed a little bit of time to recuperate from Sun Was on a Weaving by Suzanne Collins. 2025 was the year of me reading The Hunger Games for the first time. And I read the entire series, and there's a lot of 5 stars in that, but I also have a rule for myself. I only put 1 book per series on the list, and Sunrise, easily my favorite. I think it might be controversial to say, but Jesus Christ, this book destroyed my soul, and therefore alone it goes in the #1 spot. And even as I've reread The Hunger Games and Catching Fire as well this year, and it has very heavily affected the way I read those books, because Jesus Christ, The Hunger Games is, in case you don't know, a YA dystopian novel where we're in this world where you have like the capital, which is like the rich people, and then the 13, like you have 12 districts that are poor. And several years before the start of the book, the districts came an uprising against the capital, and it was like this very large rebellion that the capital just barely won. And as a punishment for that rebellion, they decided the Hunger Games, which is a fight to the death basically that's held each year, where every district has to give up 1 boy and 1 girl. They get randomly selected to be entered into these games. And in the first book, we follow Katniss, whose sister actually gets chosen for the games, and she's like, oh fuck no, and she volunteers to take her place, and that's the way things start off. In this book, we follow Haymitch, who is Katniss's mentor in the original series, and he does much more than that, but I don't know what else to say without explaining things. But the mentors are always the winners of previous games, so we follow Haymitch in this book and his games, which were especially important because they were quarter quill, which every quarter, so every, 25 years, the Hunger Games have like special teaming, and for Haymitch's quarter quill, it's that double the amount of tributes are going in, so that means 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys, and it's devastating. As you could have thought. Like, double the amount of kids being killed, of course that's sad. But Jesus Christ, this was such a good book. It deals a lot, especially with propaganda. I thought it was really interesting because we do actually get quite a lot of information about Haymitch's games in Catching Fire. So to focus his book on propaganda and really show how different things were, I thought was so interesting just in general. What's being said about propaganda was so interesting in general. This is also a very rebellion heavy book actually, and I really love that element to it as well, because I feel like the strength about the Hunger Games is that Katniss isn't like a chosen one. She very much just is like the right figure at the right time for this rebellion, and always existed. It doesn't exist just because of her, and I think this book showcases that tremendously, how much has been going on throughout the years. And also just love learning about Haymitch. I've always loved Haymitch as a character, but he's alcoholic, so like it's been very easy to assume that he's went through some rough shit in his life, and getting to read her story, it's just like, yeah, he went through some real rough shit, and this book just absolutely broke me. Then next, we go in a bit lighter with First Time Caller by Vicky Borison. This is another adult romance book, this one following. By the way, for these ebooks, I'm really shit at remembering names, and for like these books, I can look in the back for the ebooks, I obviously can't. So bear with me. In this book, we follow a woman, a single mom actually, and one night she hears her kid on the phone to like this random guy, and she's like, that's us. So she barges it and basically takes the phone away from her, and then learns that her daughter was actually calling this radio show, which has like a romance hotline, so where they can like ask for romantic advice. She called into the show being like, hey, my mom has been single my entire life, and I feel like she has to date someone and find love, and can you help me with that? But obviously when our main character takes the phone, she gets talking to the radio host and like more about like her beliefs in love and stuff like that, and that whole conversation ends up going viral and catching a lot of attention from people, because a lot of people can relate to her struggles with relationships. So the radio broadcast network sites that are gonna do like on the show from now on, I'm going to do like a segment trying to find love for our main character. And of course, she ends up falling in love with the radio show host. And this was adorable. I loved it. I feel like very often when the main character, like this is dual POV, so technically the guy is also the main character. But typically when you have a main character in romance, it's kind of like a hopeless romantic, like the female main character in this book is. I feel like there's times where she has, like, most in the books, even though it all ends in a happily ever after, like, like, you know, they won it all along. But like throughout the book, the character typically has to learn, like, oh, being a hopeless romantic isn't good and I should get rid of these notions and stuff like that. Or like she's ridiculed for it, and that was not the case in this book at all. Like the dedication for this book quite literally is for the hopeless romantics. That was very clear. I feel like it was kind of like a love letter to love in that sense, where even though the male main character is very anti-love, very much because of like the struggles he's seen people gone through in his show, he's anti-love, he doesn't get it, and he doesn't really get why this woman is so hopeless romantic, but like he still has that respect for her. He's like, wow, I wish I had that look on love, and I wish that was still possible for me. And I really liked Alma too, that she was never brought to a point where she felt like she had to lower her standards or anything when it comes to love. I really like that. I think that's like something that really connected with me personally, because like I said, I feel like that's so rare in a romance genre, which is weird because I feel like the genre is for hopeless romantics, you know. I really liked them into it, and I also just really liked the development of the romance. I thought they just connected together so well. I don't know, I was rooting for them so very early on because it worked. And then, but like the struggles they kind of had before getting together also really made sense to me, and they had such great banter, such a great dynamic, and overall I just thought it was a really fun book as well. So I don't know, I really loved it, and I can't wait to read more by B.K. Borison because I know this is a very beloved author, but it's the first book I've read by her, so definitely making it a priority for 2026. Then next I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is an adult fantasy novel following Owaya, and she as a kid got rescued by a vampire king, and ever since then she's been raised by him, so that's her dad, and therefore she lives around shit ton of vampires as just a regular human, which of course is very dangerous. And even though her dad has like trained her to fight and everything, it's still not enough. She always knows that she's in danger, and luckily these trials are coming up very soon, and these trials are held every so often, and the winner of them gets a wish granted from the god. So she decides to participate in these trials because then she can wish for the goddess to do this bond between her and her dad where they basically siphon off each other's powers, and she becomes just as powerful as him, and he's one of the most powerful vampires in the world. So that's taken care of, because in this world it's also like very dangerous to get turned by a vampire, in case you think that's an easier solution. Like most humans die during the turning process, like it's not a guarantee, you know. But of course winning these trials isn't going to be easy, because the trials, everyone in it is also a vampire. She's the only human, so she's also, it's like again like trials to the death in a sense. So it's gonna be a difficult one for her to survive, and she very quickly learns that she needs a partnership. So and the only one willing to grant her one is this guy, actually from a rivaling area to her father's kingdom. They don't get along at first, but then they do, because it's a romance, of course. And I was so surprised by how much I love this. I picked this up because I love a vampire story, and I've seen a lot of hype around this series, but still I think it blew me away. I just thought the trials were so much fun and such a great way to like kind of like structure the story, and the way the trials would then also cause for a very natural way for us to learn about this world and like the gods and everything. I thought that was really well done. I really liked Owaya as a character. She was very strong, but also like had her insecurities and had her moments of doubt, and I really liked how that was done. The dynamic between Owaya and the love interest, also thought like that was great. Like honestly, that's such great back and forth, and they really built this connection throughout the book as well. And I really love how it kind of started as like, oh, we need to be able to fight together, and then it grew into like, oh, we're friends, and of course fell in love later on. So it kind of feels a bit like a slow burn. I really like how that was just overall done throughout this book, and it was just such a compelling read. And like towards the second half of this book, kind of the plot doesn't just become the trials, like more unrest of the outside world started coming in, and I thought that was really well done. And the way this ended just had me shook, so I'm very excited to read the sequel. Again, high priority for 2026. And then for the next book, we're staying in the vampire realm, because the next one is Burial Bones in the Midnight Soil by V. Schwab. This again was a surprise to me. This is a adult fantasy book, but it's a bit strange to describe, as it just basically, all you gotta know is that it follows 3 women throughout history who get turned into vampire. It's lesbian, it's toxic, and it's vampires. Those are the 3 keywords you gotta know. It's kind of more like a vibes book than a plot book, hence why it's hard to explain. I love this so much. I adore the writing for this, and I totally get what is not working for everyone. I feel like it's very, a bunch of people I follow, it's like a very 50-50 split of people who like this and who don't. And I totally get why it wouldn't work for everyone. I feel like this is kind of in the vein of The Invisible Life of Eddie LaWoo, like that, which is also a Schwab, where it's also kind of like it either works for you and then it works really well for you, or just really misses the boat. I feel like this is one of those books, but for me it really works. I love the writing in this one. I thought it was so beautiful, and then it also manages to stay within like that same vibe, but also get it more modern in a modern day timeline, and I love that. I love these characters. I thought they were so interesting. They're not good people, they're not, hence the toxic, but so interesting. And I also love how it just kind of lets characters go on a full rampage without necessarily like finding an excuse for it, just like bloodthirsty for bloodthirsty's sake. I feel like that's so rare in stories centering women, and I just really liked how it was done. And overall I thought it was a really interesting story, and I really liked it. I do think at a certain point there were some things where I was like, I don't know about this, but I do think the ending like really wrapped it all together very well. And I genuinely love the ending. I feel like it's very like open in a sense that you can have multiple interpretations for it, and I think that's really interesting. So yeah, I love this book. Then next on the list is The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the second book in the Devabad trilogy, which I also read, and its completion is here. But this was easily my favorite. In this series we follow our main character whose name I've already forgotten, and I've not even read this book that long ago. I'm so sorry. This is when I don't have like a description to look at, I'm sorry. But she is a healer, and but a scammy one. Like she's always, because she's been down on her luck, she like uses that to be able to like wow people and stuff like that. But she does it through magic. But all of her magic has been fake until one night she accidentally summons a djinn, and that djinn, and through that summoning, like there's also like things coming after her, and the djinn is like, hey, the reason people are coming after you is actually because you helped djinn yourself, and from like this healer race that has been killed off like years ago. You're the only surviving one, and we didn't know you existed. So there's people coming after you because they sense your magic now, and that's problematic because they obviously went through that. So he takes her to Devabad, which is this magical city, and in the city we also follow the prince, who has recently gotten accidentally involved in this rebellion from the like half djinn, half human race. And of course, I mean, character is also half human, so it's gonna cause some tension. And yeah, this book, incredible. No notes. I thought it was so good. It's honestly a masterclass in tension building, in my opinion, because throughout the entire book we have three POVs, and they're all kind of like doing their own thing, not knowing of each other. Well, two perspectives are close to each other, but like still there's secret plans in their heads going on, and then the third POV is like completely on a different part of the world. But as a reader, you can tell how these things are going to start influencing each other as they are building towards the same moment, and the whole book just kind of feels like a countdown to that moment. And every time you see one of the characters make a plan, you're like, oh shit, that's gonna interfere with this other character's plan, and oh and then it all like breaks down in like the last quarter of the book, where it's just like high action the entire time as all these plans are like intersecting with each other, and it's just so brilliantly done. I adored it. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I think this book is like 600 pages. I read it like it was nothing because it kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. My heart was pounding the entire time. And on top of that, I also think it builds out the world that already was super interesting in the first book, builds it out even more, makes it even more interesting. I really like the complexity of these characters, and I just chef's kiss. And then finally for today we have The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, because every year there has to be a book in December that just completely takes me by surprise and makes it into my top of favorites of the year. And that's this book this year. This is a mystery book, obviously, it's Agatha Christie. And this one we follow Poirot, who has just recently moved to this small town, and like he's keeping his identity undercover because like he's a very famous detective, but he doesn't want the attention. And one day this town, this very rich woman died. The perspective we follow is this doctor who is first on the scene, and this woman's death is very much considered suicide, but is a bit suspicious, especially when the next day there's the other rich person in this town who is a guy, and the two of them were really close. The guy's Roger Ackroyd, hence the title. He confides into the doctor, and it's like, that woman killed her husband, poisoned her husband a couple of years ago because he was abusive, he was a drunk. That was her only way out. And she confessed that to me right before she passed away because she was getting blackmailed for it. And now she's dead. And then the same day that this is confessed to the doctor. Roger Ackroyd also ended up murdered, and Roger Ackroyd actually knew Poirot from like back in London, and he told his cousin, and so the cousin goes out to Poirot and is like, hey, come investigate this because the police is not doing their job. So that's the storyline that we follow. Like, I feel like the setup for this is very classic mystery. Like, there's a bunch of mysteries that have a similar setup, but this book just still felt so unique. I love Poirot. I think he's such an entertaining character to follow, and this book especially has just like a massive flair for the dramatics, and I love it. I also just really liked the character that we were following, because in this town we get told that this town is like full of people who love to gossip, and this doctor claims he's above that, but like he's also like very involved in the gossip at the same time. So I feel like that gossipy nature just is infused into the narrative, which makes it just like a very entertaining read. I overall really like the cast of characters, and there is a lot of moving aspects to this mystery, which causes for like a lot of like small reveals, some that I saw coming, some that shocked me, which was really fun. And then the final reveal again broke my brain. I feel like that's the theme for for this list, books that broke me. This is one of those. Because what do you mean? I feel like that reveal is something I never in a million years could have seen coming, yet it made complete sense as soon as it happened, and I just thought it was just so brilliantly done. So I had to make it on this list. As much as it is a last minute entry, it had to get on here. Those are my 10 favorite books that I read in 2025. Let me know about your favorite books from this past years, because I would love some recommendations, and I'll see you next time. Good. Bye.